Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, your RB Laws, and this is your co-host.
Christopher Wells.
A couple of things before we get started. When you guys comment on any of our videos from YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, we will choose one comment to read before our episode. Our comment for today's episode is from JTati0 on TikTok, so go follow him. And he said, "You guys are so underrated. Firstly, we appreciate the kind words, and I think that is a pretty fair assessment of where the podcast is right now. Hopefully we can get to that tier, where we're in the top-rated sports podcast in the world. It's a slow process,
Right.
but we have no plans of slowing down anytime soon. And we appreciate all the support, the recent content. And before we get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates."
Yeah, so pretty much, if you're watching this on Friday, right? This it's gonna be not long before All-Star weekend
For
pretty
sure.
much kicks off, right? Obviously Thursday is the last string of NBA games, only a few of them, but now we got the All-Star weekend, right? In Indianapolis, this is the time when we have all those big events, right? The stuff before the All-Star game, right? Say things like the skills competition, three-point contest, dunk contest, of course, right? All-Star game, right? Everything in between. Um, so we're just gonna kind of, I guess, go through some of the events, and kind of look at the teams and matchups and kind of give our thoughts as to who, we kind of expect to come out on top. I guess we'll start off with the All-Star Celebrity Game, right?
Enjoy.
Team Shannon versus Team Stephen A. A lot of big names here, right? So a mixture of some football players, right? Like before, right? You got Micah Parsons, right, from the Cowboys on Team Shannon. You got CJ Stroud, right? For the Houston Texans,
Texans, yep,
right? Yeah, obviously. So I mean, some very recognizable names
for
there.
sure.
Um, Also have others, right? Kai Sanat, right? Obviously, Jewel Lloyd, WNBA player, Natasha Cloud, WNBA player, Meta World Peace, former NBA player, right? And then also Jennifer Hudson, right? And others.
Yeah,
So, it's kind of the rosters are kind of a little balanced. From what you had explained about, with Stroud playing a bunch of sports, when he was in high school,
yeah,
it probably feels like his team probably is going to have the edge, right? I would say he's probably the best athlete,
for sure.
of any of them. Meta World Peace, obviously he's older. He did play in the NBA, but he's a big dude. Even when he played, he was a big dude. So, I would probably assume that Team Stephen A, probably be able to pull it out, of course, but you never know, right? Like sometimes these people can get hot. So I'm gonna go with Team Stephen A because I think they have a few more athletes and more size on the roster.
Yeah, agreed. Because you have T-Jass. We know that he's a baller. CJ Stroud. We've seen the highlights. Obviously, Meta World Peace. It wouldn't surprise me. Meta World Peace comes out there with like a 40-point triple double with blocks or something
Yeah.
like that. And then there's some names here, notable ones like you said. Some of them aren't athletes. Some of them are though. However, I'm kind of curious about the environment because I think they're saying that it's supposed to be in Lucas Oil Stadium, and that's where
Yeah.
the Colts play, if I'm not mistaken. So that should kind of be intriguing to see, how filled the stadium is going to be for this. But nonetheless, I think it'll be entertaining, especially, with Shannon Sharp and then Stephen A having their banter, obviously, because normally they mic the coaches up for this thing, I believe. So
Yeah.
that should be interesting. And then also the celebrity coaches as well, like 50 Cent. That should be pretty fun. Lil Wayne, Asia Wilson. So I think this is on par to be one of the better celebrity games that we've seen because I normally when we watch these it's just like filled with memes, but I think this might be a little bit more competitive than years
Yeah.
past.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So now we move on to the Rising Stars, right? So this one, obviously, the format is different than what it used to be. So they have, it's like a 3-game mini tournament, right? With it has 4 teams. And each team is comprised of like different, players or whatever. So you have Team POW, right, which has Bilal Koulibaly, Jaime Jaquez, Brandon Miller, Pajemski, Jabari Smith Jr., Kaysen Wallace, Victor Wembanyama. Team Tamika, right? Tamika Catchings. She's got Paolo, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Duran, Keontae George, Scoot, Jaden Ivey, Keegan Murray, Vince Williams Jr. from Memphis. And then Team Jalen Rose, he's got Jordan Hawkins, Chet Holmgren, Walker Kessler, Derek Lively II, Benedict Mathurin, Shaden Sharp, Jeremy Sohan, Jalen Williams of OKC, right? J Dub, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken,
sir.
right? Forward. And then Team Detlef Shrimp, right? He's got Isan Almansa. These are, I believe, the G League Ignite guys, right?
Sorry,
Matas
I'm not.
Bucelis.
I wasn't laughing at anybody's name. It's just when I heard Detlef, I immediately thought of like my team back in the day. I had his
Yeah,
card, and like he had like a
right.
99 3-point rating,
Yeah.
and he would just brick. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, you're good. Matas Bucelis, Ron Holland the second, Mac McClung, Tyler Smith, right? Oscar Sheboy, I believe, and then Alondis Williams, right? So, so it's a mixture, right? Each team, like the team Powell, Tamika, and Jalen, right? They have a mix of like rookies and second year guys, and then Team Detlef is the one that has like the G League Ignite guys, and then other guys that are like on G League teams, right? Like say McClung is not a G League Ignite guy because he's not like a young rookie guy,
Yeah,
right? He's in the G League. Um, so I mean, like it's those games were to like certain scores or whatever, and it's like multiple rounds, right? So I mean, I guess like if you look at team Tamika, right? That probably had you have Paulo Boncaro, right? Who's probably the best player of the guys in the mix, right? And he's a pretty versatile guy that can do a lot of different things. Um, then you have Dyson Daniels, but I think he's not playing, right? Because he just recently tore his meniscus, so
yeah.
he's probably going to have to be either replaced or something like that, right? I think it was I don't know who's replacing him. I think it was no, it was Vince Williams
Okay.
from Memphis. He's replacing Dyson Daniels, right? Then you have Jalen Duran and Keontae George. So you kind of have like a mixture of size and shooting there. Team Jalen is just ginormous, right? Lively, Kessler, Holmgren, right? And then Hawkins is the lone guard, but all the other
Yeah.
ones are like basically 7 footers.
Mm-hmm.
Holmgren kind of is like more of a versatile 7 footer than Kessler's like just like the mountain shot blocker, and then Lively's like the pure athlete.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I guess like I would probably say Team Tamika's probably the most talented of the group. But then you look at some of like the other names of the squads, right? Like Team Jalen, you got Matherin, you got Sohan and Jalen Williams, right? That's a pretty good group as well.
Yeah.
So, but then also Team Pow is Wenbanyama, right? And that could be like kind of the cheat code, of all of this, right? Because he's also really good as well. So I don't know. Like any of those three teams could win. Probably not Team Detlef, unless the G League Ignite guys go crazy.
Yeah, and I
Um,
heard with Detlef, sorry, one update to them. I think Amani Bates is supposed to replace Ron Holland, and that's kind of disappointing. Not in the sense that we have to see Amani Bates because I think
right.
we like Amani Bates, but it's just Ron Holland was projected to be a top 5 pick this year or this coming draft. So not to see him play on a stage like this is kind of hurts this team. So I think they're the ones that I would scratch off for like winning anything, honestly.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like it's probably going to be either Team Pow or Team Tamika because
Okay.
I feel like with Pow you have Wemby, you have Brandon Miller, so you already have two of really really talented rookies.
Hmm.
Jaquez, Jabari Smith, who's a really good second year guy. Pajemski is a rookie, so it's probably going to be either them or Team Tamika. Um, so I don't know. Like I might have to lean into Team Pow, but like again, like any of those teams, any of those three teams could win. I think. But I feel like Jalen's might be a little bit tougher just because like there's a lot more like just big guys as opposed to like some other ball handling guards, even though they do have some.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Team Power for sure. I think they're overloaded. I think in talent. I think you can make an argument that like Team Tamika is better, but overall, I think these guys will probably gel together pretty well because you got Bilal with the defense, Hawkes with pretty much everything, Brandon Miller. These are all guys that can get pretty hot pretty quickly. I think, and they're also very underrated. It is kind of interesting. Like even Wembanyama, I feel like is underrated at this point because
Yeah,
he is on a minutes restriction. So if we saw him at his full potential, I think his numbers
yeah,
would be through the roof.
and still had a triple double in blocks
Exactly. So
with block.
the guy's been balling on another level, doing things that we haven't seen or haven't seen in a long time. Then you've got Kassan Wallace. Interesting. I think that's an interesting pick because I think that's a sleeper one as well. Pajemski, obviously, and like I said, Brandon Miller, Jabari Smith. I think Jabari Smith might be their X factor, honestly, but
Mhm.
we'll see. I'm taking Powell though.
Yeah. And then for the skills challenge, you have three teams. You have, which I think this one is kind of like I think the most interesting skills challenge that we've seen in quite some time because we had a couple like in the last couple of years that were just like not all that great.
Agreed.
Just for one reason or another. But this one is really interesting. So you have Team Pacers, which is kind of like what they did, I think, when it was in Cleveland, right? And they had the 3 Cleveland All-Stars, right? Because like all 3 of them were All-Stars or
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, well, I guess that was before Donovan Mitchell. So, but they still had 3 Cleveland players, right? Because I think it was like Garland, Mobley, and Allen. But this time it's Team Pacers, Halliburton, Mathurin, and Miles Turner, that versus Team Top Picks, right? So, the last few number 1 picks, right? Wemby, Boncaro, and Anthony Edwards, and then Team All Stars, right? Which has Scotty Barnes, Tyrese Maxey, and Trey Young. I think it's interesting how they use 2 of the guys that were like the injury replacements in the Eastern Conference, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of gives them, like a little bit more time to shine, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
But I like all 3 of these teams. I mean, like they're all really good. I mean, obviously, you have, with the team Pacers, probably the best chemistry, right? Like probably not the most talented group, but it's like the most chemistry, and they're in Indiana, right? So they've been able to practice for like
Yeah.
way longer, than the other groups because they will literally just play in regular team practices.
Yeah.
Um, Team Top Picks is probably the most intriguing in terms of talent, right? Because it's a group of guys that are all like tall and big and athletic for their positions. Well, Wembanyama's skinny,
Yeah.
but he's 7'4", so that's
Yeah.
still ridiculous
Hmm.
in terms of size, right? And then Paolo is obviously huge for a forward, and then Edwards is pretty big for a guard. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of so that's probably your best group of athletes, I would say. And then Team All Stars is probably like your maybe most skilled group, right? Where you got like Trey Young and Tyrese Maxey and then Scotty Barnes who can all do, a lot of things with the ball. So I don't know. That one's kind of a tough pick because you almost want to lean into Team Pacers because of the fact that like again they've all like played together. But I don't know. I'm honestly just gonna like kind of zag and say Team um top picks just because I feel like they can actually still do a lot of the like playmaking, ball handling stuff where you can throw the ball into the circle or whatever and then, be able to like finish and pull up and shoot. I mean, obviously like it's not like, those 3 guys are dynamite shooters because that's,
Right.
because Banyama hasn't shot great from 3 this year. Boncaro's a much improved 3-point shooter. Edwards is a much improved 3-point shooter. Um
But it's not lights
but
out.
I don't know. Like, yeah, not lights out, but like, probably like they can probably shoot well enough, like, and they're athletic enough that they could probably win it out. And then probably like runner up is probably Team Pacers just because they've been playing together for so long at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Team All Stars. I know this is kind of
Okay.
intriguing because I think it was actually Scotty Barnes who had like the gajillion missed layups, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. But I
Yeah.
think he's gonna redeem himself. Tyrese Maxey, I think, is a sleeper pick, and then obviously Trey Young because they do have some really good playmakers, and then obviously you've got Tyrese Maxey with the shooting, Scotty Barnes with the athleticism for the finishing part, I guess. So I hope that he actually makes the layup, but that's kind of like the underdog pick. I'm just trying to show love to them, honestly. But it wouldn't surprise me if Team Pacers takes it. But I'm gonna go Team All Stars.
Yeah. And then we have the 3-point contest, right? So this one is intriguing, right? Obviously, we have the defending champ, right, from last year, Damian Lillard, right here to defend his title. Um, Going against a teammate Malik Beasley, right? Who I don't know if he still is, but at one point he was leading the NBA in 3-point percentage. I'm not sure if he still is.
Yeah.
Um, Jalen Brunson, who's obviously shot the lights out from 3 this year. Halliburton obviously shot the ball really well. I think because he's been, coming back from injury, right? The stats have gone down somewhat, but obviously, like at full strength, right? He's a very good outside shooter. I mean, all of these guys are good outside shooters. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
But Markkanen, Donovan Mitchell, Towns, and Trey Young. Um, I don't know. Is this a situation where we go back to back possibly? Because I mean, you look at Lillard, and obviously he won it last year amongst a crowded field of talented guys. We know he's a guy that historically has done pretty well under pressure. So I don't know. I might have to pick him to defend his title.
Okay. I think that's smart. I'm gonna go with my boy Cat. He's a previous winner
Okay.
as well. I think he's the only big man to actually win this event. Potentially he could do it, another time. So I'm gonna go with Cat. I think he's the sleeper pick, but there are some guys here that can get pretty hot. I think the one that I'm
Yeah.
probably the lowest on is honestly Halliburton. And it's not because he can't shoot. It's just I don't know if I trust his shot,
Mhm.
off the rack. I've never really seen him shoot off the rack. So that would be
Okay.
the one thing that would intrigue me because I don't know if that's going to mess up his shooting motion
Right.
as awkward
Mhm.
as it is already. So I think Trey Young is another interesting pick. I'm not sure if he's going to heat up though. Donovan Mitchell's an interesting one. I think
Yeah,
this is a good like selection of guys, but I'm gonna go Cat.
right. Yeah, I mean, ideally, it's like somebody with like a fast, like simple release, and
Yeah,
also like somebody who doesn't really jump like much on their shots. Like that's
exactly,
one example of like why Towns can make a lot of sense because he doesn't jump at all pretty much on his shot.
exactly.
And it's like, and it's a shot that like you can just grab and then just like step forward and shoot. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's
So
a
it's
one
like,
motion thing
yeah,
versus
exactly.
people with hitches. Like I think Brunson and Hallie are probably the two that I'm the lowest on, honestly.
Right. And then like Beasley, obviously he's pretty good as a catch and shoot guy. He kind of jumps on his shot, like not like a crazy amount.
Yeah,
And then obviously like,
just
Trey
no
Young
thug
doesn't
shakes, please.
Oh yeah, I think we saw that when he was in Washington, right?
Yeah,
Where
he did
yeah,
it
or
across the way from us. It was dark.
yeah, but yeah. So then moving on, then you also have Stephen Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu, right? Obviously, Sabrina, right, plays for the New York Liberty, right? They're coming off their finals berth, right? They didn't win, but they were still in the finals against the Vegas Aces, um, right? So she set the record, right, of the 3-point competition, right? She had like what 37 out of 40, which
Yeah,
is ridiculous. Um, but obviously, then you still got to factor in, regardless of who it is, Steph is still Steph in terms of how he can shoot. And again, he's been in high pressure situations before, so I'm gonna pick him to win. But I mean, there is a world where he might end up coming up short. But I just feel like but I feel like he wants to win it. Like just that kind of like continue to add on, or
yeah,
whatever. So I'm gonna pick him, but again, like it should be a good one though,
yeah.
because
I
she's
think he's
also a very good shooter.
Yeah, she's a phenomenal shooter. I think he's gonna go like extra try hard, and she probably will too. Because I think this is a big
Yeah,
deal because they are compared a decent chunk. And I think the rules are kind of interesting. I think it's like 4 ball racks, and then they get the 1 money ball. So it's pretty much similar to the 3-point
yeah,
contest
that's
with
right.
the all money one, and then the shot values they're pretty much the same. So the intriguing thing is he Curry, I think, will shoot from the NBA line with NBA basketballs, and then she'll
Right,
shoot from the WNBA line with WNBA basketballs. So that
right.
might be the edge where Sabrina might be able to cook him. But I'm gonna go with Curry.
Yeah. And then we have the slam dunk contest, right? So obviously this one is always kind of an intriguing one, and obviously with Jalen Brown being in it, right? This is kind of like the first, really good player that's been, no insult to the other guys, but like Jalen Brown's an all-star and all NBA
Yeah,
guy. I mean that's the first one we've had in a while.
yeah. No more
Um,
Jericho Sims back to back, whatever those are called.
well, I wasn't gonna call out names, but
Well, I did for you.
yeah, but regardless, you have Jalen Brown, you have Mac McClung, right, who won it last year. You have Jaime Jaquez Jr. of the Miami Heat. And then you have Jacob Toppin, who I think plays for the Knicks G League team, right? So
Hmm.
the Westchester Knicks or whatever it is,
Yeah.
I think that's the name. So I mean, again, we've seen Mac McClung. He had some wild dunks last year.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, he's not the biggest guy, obviously, because all the other guys are forwards, right? Like 6'7" ish, right? Somewhere around that. Where he's like what 6'2" or 3 or whatever.
Yeah, if that, honestly.
Yes, but so I mean, I don't know. I feel like he's probably still going to end up being like the most creative dunker. It's just a matter of is he actually going to be able to pull off dunks that are vastly different from what he did last year,
Right.
right? Because that's the thing. If he tries to repeat, obviously he knows this, right? If he's repeating some of the same dunks from last year, it's going to be a problem. But of these guys, I feel like he's probably still has like the most bounce and like the most creativity. So I feel like I'm just going to go with him, to defend his title. Like obviously, I mean, like Toppin, he's the brother of Obi Toppin, who was in the dunk contest. So clearly, they got some athletic genes.
Oh, for sure.
And obviously, we've seen Jalen Brown is a really good athlete. So I don't know if I would ever really call him like a dunk contest type dunker.
Right.
I mean,
He's
obviously,
an
he's been
in-game
able to.
dunker. He's really good at in-game.
Right, exactly. But we'll see. Because obviously, like there have been guys that have won it where you're like, wow, that kind of came out of nowhere. But I'm gonna pick McClung to defend his title. Because I feel like it seems like he seems like the type of guy where I think if you hadn't already seen him last year, which we've seen him before. Obviously he went viral. When he was in college and high school. But he's the type of guy where I think he's kind of built for a competition like this. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna pick him to defend his title.
Agreed. Mac McClung is the cheat code. I think he's going to win it based off his creativity, based off of that his athleticism, and the fact that that he is one of the shorter guys here. So I think the crazier the dunk, it also looks better when you're shorter, honestly. So that's going to help him. I think he has a lot of things going in his favor. I think the only one that's like got me head scratching is potentially Jaquez. I don't know how much he's going to be able to do. Like if he's doing like basic windmills, that's probably like a first round exit. But I'm gonna either go with Mac McClung or Jacob Toppin. I feel like Jacob Toppin is probably going to be the sleeper pick. I think he might pull out some creative stuff. I think it's just a matter of how bouncy can he really be. But I think this is going to be an entertaining one. And like you said, Jaylen Brown brings some buzz to this, and then obviously Mac McClung defending the crown also brings some buzz to it because in previous years we've been like, okay, this is kind of mid, but regardless, I think Mac McClung is going to take it.
Yeah. And then that leads us to, the All-Star game, right? Obviously, you have this time East versus West, right? So it's no longer, the captains like choosing their teams, right? Because obviously last year, right, it was like, pickup style where they picked them up right before the game. And then obviously before that, they had the television thing where they did it, like a week or two or whatever before. But this time it's just East-West, right? So on the East, you got Giannis, Embiid is out, right? And Randall is out, right? So you got Giannis, Halliburton, Lillard, Tatum, Bam, Paolo Banchero, Scotty Barnes as an injury replacement, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, and then Trey Young is replacing, who's another injury replacement. And then for the West, right, you have LeBron, Luca, Durant, Shea, and then Jokic, and then you have for the reserves, right? Booker, Steph, AD, um, Edwards, Paul George, Carl Anthony Towns. Kawhi was interesting because he recently got hurt. And he's out. Was out. He missed the other night with an adductor
Mm-hmm.
injury. And Ty Lue, he said he wasn't sure whether or not he'd play in the All Star game.
Right.
So I'm curious to see if that impacts anything. I mean, if he's like hurt bad, then I would just think you just wouldn't play him at all. Um, so that would be kind of interesting. But regardless, right, that's your groupings. Obviously, I feel like when you kind of look at it, it feels like the West, like from a talent perspective, is just probably better. I think Embiid being out, obviously, that's one of the bigger reasons why, right? Because him being out really does hurt it. Because you still have some really good players in the East, right? Because you have Tatum, and you have Giannis, right? And then you have other guys like Halliburton and Brunson, and others. But then you look at the West. I mean, like, having Shea, Luca, LeBron, Durant, and Giannis, like all in like a starting 5-man group, just seems kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
And their bench.
right, yeah, yeah, exactly. And then the bench, like the fact that like a Stephen Curry is like a sixth man, or like an AD is a sixth
Yeah.
man, right? When those two guys would probably start for the East,
Yeah.
like
Even Kawhi.
yeah. Or like, maybe AD wouldn't necessarily start for the East. Maybe he wouldn't be able to get it ahead of the other guys, but still, like starting caliber.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I get
like
you.
just like the fact that a Steph is coming off the bench for the Western Conference, like, just speaks volumes about the talent. So I feel like that's probably like the easy one to pick. I do think the Eastern one, is interesting from an athlete standpoint, right? Because like when you look at their groupings, like even their like smaller ish guards other than Brunson are like solid athletes, right? Say like,
Yeah.
Maxi's a small guard, he's a good athlete. Donovan Mitchell's a small guard, he's a good athlete. Not, Trey Young obviously is not super athletic, right? Halliburton's 6'5", but he's not super athletic. But Lillard can still kind of get up. But then you have like Giannis, who's obviously like a physical cheat code. Then other guys but at the same time, I just feel like the talent level on the West is just better. So like I feel like it would be an upset if the East won, especially without Embiid, right? Like if Embiid was there, that would probably at least, make it like around even. But
Sure.
I think without him, I feel like the West has a clear advantage, even if Kawhi doesn't play.
Yeah. I think the West is going to dog walk the East, and it's kind of been like that for a long, long time. Honestly, like for as long as I've been watching, like I could just remember, the West pretty much dominating the East in this event. Regardless, the rosters are kind of wild though, because it always is kind of fun to look at how deep each conference really is. Like you said, when you have a guy like Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis coming off the bench, I mean that just kind of speaks volume to the talent and the guys that you really do have in the Western Conference right now. I think the East is definitely the sleeper pick, because you do have guys like Paolo, Scotty Barnes, Jalen Brunson, but all those guys are pretty much liable to go off at any given point. So it wouldn't surprise me if, a couple of them get hot and they kind of just start chucking, like, say Dame just starts chucking from like 40 feet and then,
Right.
it's a close game. Like that wouldn't surprise me. But my question would be, what's your answer for guys like Bron? What's your answer for Jokic? What's your answer for even a guy like Shea? Luca? Like there's a lot of guys that I think the East just doesn't really have an answer for defensively. And I know the All-Star game isn't really known for its defense, but I think these guys are probably going to try. But what do you make of like the format change? Do you like this format better, like going back to the old format, or do you like the
Um,
captains thing?
Pretty fine with like East versus West,
Okay.
honestly. I mean, like, I guess, the downside to it is kind of like what we alluded to, right? Like the idea of like because the West generally has just had more talent than the East, then you get like sort of a watered down ish type team for
Yeah.
the East, especially like if one of the top guys, like say an Embiid, is hurt.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm comfortable either way. Obviously the draft is kind of interesting, right? Because then it's like, it's kind of cool to see like the guys pick the teams and then people come up with storylines where it's like, well, they didn't pick that guy because of X, Y, and Z. Or, oh, they picked that guy because he's trying to trade for him. So I think from like a narrative perspective, it's more interesting. But like I don't really have an issue, with going back to the East West. I feel like last year's was just kind of like was just a little bit weird. Like if you're gonna bring back like, picking teams, I'd probably just prefer like to go back to like the one where they just did it like on TV like a week or two before the
Right.
game. Like I don't know, it was kind of weird to
Yeah.
see
The
like the
pregame
draft.
draft was horrible.
It was kind of
It was kind
yeah,
of
it was
cringe.
kind it was kind yeah, like what was it? It was like Jokic where he was like running up to LeBron like
Yeah.
please pick me.
Yeah.
Like that was just kind of
It was
funny.
dark.
So
And I think
and they were like
they're going back to also like the 4-quarter 12-minute thing, right?
oh really?
I think so,
I didn't know that.
but
Yeah,
I could be
so they got
completely
rid of
wrong.
the thing where they're going to a specific score.
Yeah, I think they're going back to the pre-2018 format, but I
Oh
could be
wow.
completely wrong.
Okay, because I liked
Me too.
the going to a score format. If they
Me
took
too.
that away, are you sure?
I think so. Yeah, it
Okay,
says will feature the traditional scoring system with 4 12-minute quarters will also return. The cash prize thing is still there or whatever
okay,
for the charities. But they're not going to have the fourth quarter that's unlimited or conclude when one team, reaches the
wow,
final target score. And that's the thing. I was kind of disappointed about that because I thought that was going to be like,
right.
the the way going forward, and now it's not. And I'm like, I don't know if these guys are really going to try, but it should
Yeah,
be
I like
intriguing.
yeah, because I liked that. To
Yeah,
be honest, I mean, like obviously, I guess maybe the issue is like there's a world where like it just runs on for like way too long.
right,
Like there could just be like a random game where like both teams go cold for like 10,
right.
15 minutes and I don't think there's any like timeouts or whatever when it gets to that point like it's
Yeah,
just straight up like they just show the whole game or whatever right or if there or there's no like commercial breaks or anything but I don't know I liked that format
me
so that's
too.
kind of a disappointment to see that go away I don't mind as much about like going back to East West but like
Yeah.
the fourth quarter thing I did not know that was a scoop I did not know that one.
Yeah, we're going back to the pre-2018 format. So it is what it
Okay.
is, but like I don't know. I feel like it takes away a certain edge of the game, but I
Yeah,
think it'll still be good.
right, yeah I mean like usually like at least one quarter normally is good. Like, like the first quarter is like usually like the stretch of highlights, and then the fourth quarter is where they usually buckle down and get serious. But
Yeah.
like you said,
Depending
there
on
I
if the
do
game is close, cuz
yeah, depending on
it used to be like if the game was not close, like kind of be a
yeah,
stinker. Like you could turn it off
yeah,
in the third, honestly.
yeah, it'd be like a point where guys are just running out of the way and then like just
Yeah,
launching from like 70 feet. But
exactly.
yeah. Yeah, but yeah, so it'll be interesting to see, in Indianapolis. So, shout out Indianapolis, right?
Yeah,
Who gets
shout
the
out.
All-Star game.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a 73rd one. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a
because
lot of
I think
history
they've
there.
been doing it since I think it was 1951.
Yeah.
Obviously the formats have changed over time, locations have changed over time, but yeah, so it hasn't been around like the NBA's entire history, but relatively close.
Yeah.
Because again, I think it started in 46 or whatever it was. And so they've been doing it, since like 5 or 6 years in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now it's going to be interesting, because, obviously after that, right, we're going to have the second, well, they call it the second half, but it's really not because most
Right.
teams have like, around 30-ish games left. Which is, kind of interesting that they call it that. But regardless, um, so yeah, I guess we'll kind of get into, some news rumors and whatnot, so obviously, there was one that actually happened right before we got on,
Hmm.
basically, where it was Danilo Gallinari, right, who signed with the Milwaukee Bucks, right? That one was kind of interesting because like a few hours before that, it was kind of reported that the Clippers were interested in signing him. And they said when he signed that he was trying to decide between it was Milwaukee, it was the Clippers, and I think it was also the Bulls, which was kind of random. Um,
Okay.
unless it was another team I'm forgetting. But he chose the Celtics because it was Cleveland. Cleveland was the other team. But he chose the Celtics because of Doc Rivers. He had played with Doc
You mean the
Rivers.
Bucks?
Yeah, or he chose
Yeah.
the Bucks, my
Yeah.
bad, that's
No, you're
because
good.
yeah, Freudian
Yeah.
slip. He chose the Bucks because of Doc Rivers,
Right.
and Doc Rivers coached the Clippers when he was there.
Right.
So he chose the Bucks because of that. Um, Curious to see how he fits in. Obviously, it's like another forward that you can put out there that can stretch the floor and
Hmm.
score. Obviously he's older now, coming off some injuries. Obviously we saw him in Washington,
Yeah.
because he did play in Washington, earlier this season before he was traded to Detroit.
Yeah. I
Played
saw him. I
center.
think four. Yeah, I think I saw him 4 times. Quite
Yeah,
literally.
played center a lot, which was
Yeah.
interesting. Um, Probably not going to have to do that for Milwaukee.
Not at all.
So I think that will probably help. Defensively, I mean, obviously, he's not that guy
No.
anymore. Well, never really was, but
No.
I mean, obviously now he wouldn't be. Um, but I guess it's just another rotational guy you can put out there and just be like, you know, we're leaning into offense. We need another stretch guy out there to hit some shots.
Yeah.
Maybe there's like a lineup where like Giannis is at the 5 or something like that. And they put out some of those other guys and then they just kind of just roll with it and see what happens. So, not really going to complain, right? Because it's a minimum contract, right? And it's, probably better than what they would have been able to do, with trades, considering the trade landscape didn't really seem like it was going to amount to a whole lot for that team.
Hmm.
So I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, like, I don't really feel like it, quote unquote, fills like a hole in the roster, but it is another guy that again, he can get hot, right? And he can knock down some timely shots. And he's been in some playoff games, so I would still imagine he will probably help them. It's just again like it doesn't change what their weaknesses were, but it's still a guy you can add on to the roster. And you're not even expecting like you're not expecting to play him like 30 minutes a night anyways. He's gonna probably come off the bench, play a limited ish role as a guy that can come in and knock down some shots that can change, the pace. He can move the ball around somewhat, right? Because he's got, a little bit of those skills. Um, so I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and it's like you said, he's a decent shooter, so him being like a what, almost 39%, career shooter like from 3, that'll help them, say if Portis's shot isn't falling or maybe a Jay Crowder. Like I feel like his minutes will be relegated around like what goes on with Jay Crowder and Bobby Portis. So, it does
Right.
add another rotational piece, and you can't
Yeah.
really be mad at it because you're just adding another guy that will help you out on offense, especially spacing
Yeah.
wise, with Giannis. I think it'll help.
And it's another veteran. And it's
Exactly.
another veteran. So
Exactly. You add that veteran presence, and I think it'll work out because, like you said, we saw him play in Washington. Didn't look, amazing, obviously, due to his age and obviously the system. Like, you never want Gallo playing center, but we do know that he is like a
especially not for Washington.
exactly, but we do know he is one of those players that coaches really, really seem to like. He does just
Right.
kind of embody what the coach's voice and message is. And, if he's reuniting with one of his old coaches, I think that's a recipe for success for him.
Right. And then, next up, beef stew, Isaiah Stewart. Served up served up some punch against Drew Eubanks.
Yeah.
Not good, right?
No.
So apparently they were outside and I guess they were arguing. And then it led to some hits. And they had to be separated by security. And then Isaiah Stewart was actually arrested. I think he was like, in there for like a little bit and he's been since been released. Um Kind of wild, right? Because when it happened, right, the Suns were putting out this thing about, yeah, we're gonna take legal action, against him, which kind of suggested that like that was a pretty serious hit. They also put out there that like he didn't flinch. He didn't flinch. And he was stone cold. I think they said Eubanks was after he punched him. So I guess that
Ooh,
means, I guess that means he was unfazed by it. I guess is
yeah,
what they were putting
I
out there.
guess, yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, that's intriguing, but like, dude, that's bad. Are we ready to
yeah,
give him the Draymond treatment, or because this isn't the first time that he's threatened to have an altercation like this? We saw him literally try and go after Bron on the court. I think Gilbert
yeah.
Arenas even shared his fair share of stories, about Stewart. Are we ready to give him the Draymond treatment, or are we just chalking it up to like he just sees red all the time?
My guess is that that's probably gonna force him to probably be out for a little while. I don't know,
Agreed.
like how long, but something like that where like it has to like get to a point where you've literally been arrested, right? You're probably not gonna just come back and play,
Yeah.
like a day later. Like it may be they maybe they give him a short leash and only suspend him like a handful of games. I don't know. But you probably shouldn't just be able to just come back after getting arrested,
Yeah.
unless it was like I don't know, something like incredibly minor, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I don't know, because how long was what was it? It was KCP, right, where he was like had like the ankle monitor or whatever,
Oh yeah.
right, because
Yeah.
of the DUI or
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah.
So, um, but that's not this. But that's not the same. This is a different situation, right? So like,
Completely.
yeah, I mean, I'm not even comparing the two. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, my guess is that he'll probably have to miss some time because, again, like, because of the legal ramifications of it. But I don't know how much time he'll actually miss. But just a wild story, just the fact that like it's like a game, like a regular season game between like the Suns and the Pistons, right? Like that shouldn't generate like any
There's no
headlines at all.
stakes in it.
Yeah, like it's like the worst team in the NBA record wise. I think what are they like one surprisingly now like only one game I think back of the Wizards,
Yeah.
but like like one of the worst teams in the NBA going against like the Phoenix Suns. Like that would not normally be a story. And then we have a story that comes out from the Athletic before the game even starts. It's
Yeah.
a story that was more interesting than the game itself, right?
Exactly.
Like the game was basically over after like 10 minutes. So I mean,
Yeah. And they said it was unprovoked. The attack was unprovoked. That's intriguing. But shout out to Eubanks for actually, playing after taking the hit, I guess. Like you said, they said he was unfazed, and he did play, and I think he played, okay, I guess like 6 points, something like that.
yeah, I mean,
So
he's just an okay player. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like,
But he
I'm
he
still
still got
kind of
out on the court though. Shout out to
yeah,
him.
I'm still kind of surprised that they like gave up a second round pick. In terms of tampering to tamper for a backup center, but like
Yeah.
that's
Hey,
neither here nor there.
it is what it is. Maybe there's something we don't know about.
Yeah, and then next up, just kind of a funny story, right? So this one was from like Woj and Ramona Shelburne. I think the Athletic also added some insight into this as well, right? Where
Okay.
basically, leading up to the trade deadline, right? The Warriors, they contacted the Lakers about, hey, is LeBron available, right? I think they said the ownership for the Warriors, it was Joe Lacob, he contacted Jeannie Buss, and she basically asked about like the availability of LeBron, or he asked about the availability of LeBron. She was like, "No, not really." And then they also, I think, contacted LeBron himself, like directly, I think, and he also said like, "Yeah, I'm not really interested." They mentioned Draymond was trying to contact Rich Paul to get him to talk to LeBron to try to convince him to join. Um, Again, just kind of a wild thing, just because like who would have expected that? I mean, like, because we've, like people have joked like at different points, right? Like say, like LeBron, has always been like, yeah, Steph has always been a guy I wanted to play with. We always like, crack jokes about like, that kind of stuff. But,
Yeah.
it is kind of a funny story. I mean, again, it doesn't really amount to a whole lot right now because it ended up not happening. I think the funny part also was like the fact that layered in there was like Daryl Morey asking about LeBron.
Yeah.
And then I think Palenka was like, "Yeah, if you give us Embiid or something like that." And then they also mentioned Morey
Fair
also
trade.
contacted, like he also contacted other teams, like, "Hey, like is Durant available?" Like I think he asked about Durant. I think he definitely asked about LeBron, and I think he asked about a couple other stars. I can't quite remember who, but just kind of funny. And I remember like him having like the reputation of like always kind of trying to look around to see if there's like a deal. So that was pretty funny, I think.
Yeah.
But I do kind of wonder, like, let's say if that trade went down, who would have been in it? Because it's
True.
obviously, like I'm assuming Draymond wouldn't have been in it, Steph wouldn't have been in it. So like contractually speaking, right, it would have to be one of the other core group of guys, right? It would have to be like either Clay or like Wiggins or like Chris Paul or like one of the other young guys, like some combination of those guys,
Right.
in order to make it work. So just yeah, like I mean, would have been weird, but I don't know. Like I don't really like feel too much about it. Like I don't expect it to happen because I still feel like he wants to stay in LA.
Yeah.
Provided that they, like do enough to make him feel like, yeah, we have a chance to do stuff. You know what I mean?
For sure, yeah, and I mean that's if you take care of your superstar, you're gonna be fine. If they're
Right.
happy, it's all gonna be good. But he has been a little bit, I guess, convoluted because it all goes back to I feel like the Twitter stuff, the
Yeah.
the the
I
locker
think
room
that's what
or not the locker room, but
that,
like the images that we've seen, of Bron where it looks like he's aged 20 years in a matter of like 10 games.
yeah,
But
that's what
although they
reciprocates.
they have been better post that tweet or whatever with the hourglass. So I think he just caused a lot of speculation, and that probably sparked a lot of interest in him. But you can't really blame people for going after him because I mean, what is
Right.
the quote? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So
Yeah.
it's like
Right.
you got to shoot your shot, and
Yeah.
everybody airballed because
And I
everybody knew that he wasn't going anywhere. Honestly,
Right, and I think it's kind of interesting also, like, because that would also obviously let you know, like, teams would still be interested, in trading for him. It's
he's
just
that guy.
obviously he's not getting traded without his stamp of approval, right? Like, he
Yeah.
would have to, he's in that tier of guys where one, you're not trading him without him requesting a trade.
Yep.
He's asking to be traded. And
Yep.
two, he's not going anywhere he doesn't want to go to, right? Like, you're
Right.
not going to be able to get away with sending him, to some other random team, right? Like,
He's not coming to the Hornets. Like no, it's not happening.
no. Right. So, but yeah, but that is kind of interesting, and I just kind of wonder, like, then it's like locker room wise, like you wonder, like, say, like in the Warriors locker room, like, the fact that like he was contacting, Rich Paul to try to get LeBron to get traded over there, like, that I mean, that's
Kind
also
of
the kind of
cringe.
an interesting thing, I mean, like. I mean, obviously he wasn't doing it publicly, but like, it's out there now. I mean, obviously the trade deadline is over, so there's nothing you can do about it. But it is kind of also interesting, because like, when you look at these two teams, right? Isn't that kind of weird how it's like it was the team that was the lower seed that was asking for LeBron, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you would like it wasn't like it was a scenario where like,
Bron's
somebody
asking
on
for
the
Curry.
yeah, like it was the other way around, which,
Right.
I guess maybe some people may feel like by the end of the season, maybe the Warriors will have a better record or have a better finish to the season. Who knows?
Yeah.
But just kind of something interesting, right? And like since that point, both teams have played, a lot better. Obviously, like they've made some changes to their groups and whatnot. Like say with the Lakers, they've changed their starting lineup where now Rui is a part of the starting group, which is kind of funny, right? Because at the beginning of the season, right, we both thought that Rui would start. Even though like you may have felt differently, like about like who should have started. I think we both assumed that he was going to start
Yeah.
because he had just gotten paid and he was coming off the bench, and his minutes were kind of like a little spotty at times. For like
Yeah.
some games he would play a decent amount, and then other times he wouldn't. But now he's been starting, and he's been playing very well in the minutes he's been getting. And then you look over, the Warriors side, right? Obviously they've changed their lineup a gazillion times as well. And they actually did a thing like before this game even started where now Clay's coming off the bench, right? Which I don't think we would
As
have
he should.
expected that. Yeah, we wouldn't have expected that. I still can't believe it. Like it's
Yeah.
just kind of surprises me just given the
Downfall
fact that
needs to be studied. Dude.
yeah, I just kind of assumed it wasn't going to happen. And, it's like, I feel like he'll still play well, like, regardless, because it's like he can still play. Like, he's just not the same guy anymore, but
Yeah.
it's not like he's all of a sudden like a garbage, trash player. Like, he can
Right.
still get hot, he can still shoot. It's just a matter of, again, like, he's just at a point in his career where, like, you probably just can't play him as consistently as you might want to because he's not a star anymore, right? Like, he's
No.
still like a decent player, but he's not a star.
It's
So he's not
remind.
like a guy,
Sorry.
right?
No. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. Like at this point, like he's not a guy where it's like, oh, we have to play him no matter how well he's playing. Like say, like if Steph has a bad game, you're not benching him down the stretch. Of a
Yeah.
game, like you're playing Steph regardless, right? But like Clay is at a different point, right? Like he's at a different point now, and for him it's wild because again he's in the last year of his deal, and obviously he would be hoping, to get more money, right? He's not going to get that. But I do kind of wonder, like, where does this lead, once the season is done, right? Because like, I'm assuming he will stay. And he'll just probably make less money, but like, coming off the bench, that's a change for him because he hasn't come off the bench since he was a rookie. And
Yeah.
now it's like, when Chris Paul comes back, that, if this lineup stays, then that means in theory, like you're going to be starting Chris Paul, who hasn't come off the bench at all until this season, and then Klay Thompson. And those are two guys that are like amongst the highest paid players on your roster. And that's where I think some of the difficulties lie. When putting together a championship roster, because it's kind of hard, to put together a championship roster and a lot of your higher paid guys are coming off the bench, right? Like that was, kind of one of the issues with LA, right? Because there was a stretch where like D'Lo, Rui, and Austin were all coming off the bench, and it's not like
Yeah.
those guys are making a ton of money, but they're all guys that are amongst the higher paid players that aren't LeBron and AD. And like if they're all coming off the bench, then that kind of suggests like something's wrong with either how you're utilizing the roster or how you put together the roster. Because you shouldn't have a situation where you have like multiple high paid players, coming off the bench. Like, and it's like, and you're starting minimum contract guys,
Right.
over, those type of guys. So I do kind of wonder what happens, because now it seems like Pajemski's going to start. Curious to see if that's going to work like long term,
I
like for
think
a
it will.
championship run.
He's better than Clay
But
right now, bro. I don't care.
yeah, I guess that's the thing. I feel but I don't know. Like you still need Clay to be good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he can't be like coming off the bench and not doing anything. He still has to be good.
Because I think
But
he's transitioned into that role where it's kind of like Ray Allen on the Miami Heat, where he was like
right,
that six man who would come in and hit the shots, when
yeah,
and just kind of command the second unit in terms of his scoring and his knockdown ability and his ability to draw the defense away. And I think that's what he needs to kind of transition into. And I know that's kind of hard for him, like you were saying, because of the tier that he used to be in. Like, he was one of the top shooters in the NBA, and he's a top shooter of all time. So it's kind of difficult to swallow. I guess it's a tough pill to swallow. I guess that's the best way
yeah.
to put it.
I
But
think so.
yeah, I think he's going to transition into something like Ray Allen for
Yeah,
the
and if
Miami.
he does, then that will extend his career. I think
Exactly.
because again that say a guy like a Russell Westbrook, right? Where like
There you
if
go.
he had still had the mindset of like I have to start, like I will not come off the bench, right? Like he may not be on a team. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? Not
and the
that he wouldn't
Clippers
be on a
wouldn't be
roster.
3. The Clippers would not be the third seed if he was trying to still start.
Right, exactly. And that's going to be, kind of an interesting story. Those are some interesting storylines to watch, during this, close to the season, right? Because when you look at the Western Conference, like there's still a lot, that we kind of have to see whether or not it gets sorted out, right? Because again, we had teams like Golden State and LA, as being a lot better than they've been, so far through the season. Now they're starting to come alive. It's just kind of a matter of is it too late? And then, you look out at the East and then you kind of wonder, like, after Boston, who's the next one up, right? Because we still probably feel like it's Milwaukee. They just haven't been as consistent, as of late. And some of that is just, guys have been in and out of the lineup, and other stuff. Obviously, a new coach that kind of changes things up. And then obviously the Philly team, right? That was kind of the other team that was in the wings, but like Embiid's out. We don't know when he's
Yeah.
coming back. So that changes some things, right? The Knicks, that was another team where we thought like maybe they're on the come up, and like literally everybody on the roster for the most part is either out or just hurt,
Yeah.
which is insane. Um,
And they're
so
5-5 in their last 10, so it ain't looking too
right, so
pretty.
that exactly. So that's kind of an interesting thing I think to kind of see like towards the second half of the season, and then like at the top of the West, right? The one seed is still kind of up for grabs, right? Obviously the Minnesota, they still have the one seed as of right now, but it's Oklahoma City's only a game back. The Clippers, because they got the win over the Warriors, right? The other night, right? Now they're only a game and a half back. Although we'll see how long Kawhi's out, which is nice that the All Star break is a week long, so
Yeah.
maybe he just misses a little bit, and then comes back. And then the Nuggets, they've lost 3 in a row, so like they're kind of starting to fall away from the one seed, right? But still 2.5 games, and then after that, then you kind of wonder, 5 to 10, right? Because we kind of talked about it in the last episode where it feels like now we've got a pretty good grasp of who the top 10 teams in the West are, right? Like the order might change, but at least we know like who's going to be in there at this point, right? Because like, like the Jazz and the Rockets at one point looked like they might be in there, but they've kind of, you know, they've fallen back at this point, right? The Grizzlies obviously have just had a nightmarish year, right? Because that was another team where we thought going into the year they could probably still be in that mix, just they would have to get Ja back. But then even then, like that's 10 teams, but you're still only gonna have 8 in the playoffs. So that means like
Yeah.
2 of these 10 teams are gonna go home. and I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see who those two teams are because I still feel like in the East, like the Heat and the Magic, I feel like I just trust over the Bulls and the Hawks.
Agreed.
Like like the Heat and the Magic are 7-8, and I feel like it'll probably just stay like that. Like maybe like the Magic beat the Heat and they're 7, or maybe the Heat beat the Magic and they're 7. But I don't really like foresee the Bulls or the Hawks, getting in there. Maybe they beat the Magic and because the Magic just have some weird offensive meltdown or something, but I don't know. But like I feel like in the West, like that's kind of interesting where I feel like who are the two teams that are probably going to be left out, like, once the playoffs start? Because again, there's 10 teams that have a chance to get in, but 8 get in.
Yeah.
So, 9 and 10 are the Lakers and the Warriors. And if, the play in whatever started today, they would play each other and one of those teams would go home.
Yeah.
And then the other team would have to play the 7-8 matchup, right? The loser of 7-8 for the chance to get to 8 or just go home. So,
Yeah.
like, which of these teams, like in that 5 to 10 spot, do you think is probably going to be,
Mm,
the teams that are most likely to get out? Because I feel like, because I feel like Lakers and Warriors are probably not going to be able to catch like the 5 and 6 groups
mhm.
just because they're like a few too many losses back, unless they win
Agreed.
like literally almost every game down the stretch.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they can't get knocked, but that doesn't mean that they can't stay in and make it as like, 8 or whatever. But,
Yeah.
who do you think?
I'm looking at the Kings, honestly. That's the number one that
Okay.
I'm looking at. I
You
will
think they're
continue.
gonna get knocked out?
Yes, I will continue to
Okay.
hate on them. I think they are a team where they're going to make the first round, like, they're going to make the playoffs like every year. But I'm
Mhm.
telling you, I just feel like that roster is just one of those teams where it's going to be a first round exit until they add another guy or make some significant changes where, they can bolster up the roster and fix their errors because I think they have way too many errors and they don't have a lot of leeway to do that.
Mhm.
There's some teams where, they have leeway to make certain mistakes, but this is a team where
Mhm.
they have to pretty much be on their A game to win. Um,
Mhm.
and then the other team, that's the tricky one. I don't know what the other one would
Right.
be because, like, I
You're right,
really
'cause
like LA recently,
mhm.
and I like what the
Mhm.
Warriors have done because I think they're both like what 7-3 in their last 10. I think the Warriors just came
Right.
off a loss, but like you can't really hate on the Lakers too much. So I'd probably say the Warriors would probably go home.
Because that's the interesting part. Because again, it's two teams. So you think the Kings are going to be? Because I think the thing with the Kings is that they have one of the tougher schedules the rest of the way.
Yeah,
So that's a scenario where like they may just lose like certain games against
yeah,
like just tough opponents,
yeah.
right? Like they play like a lot of decent teams, the rest of the way. So that could be a world where like they lose a few games here and there, and then all of a sudden they drop to like 7-8.
Yeah,
And then they lose, in one of those games. I mean, obviously, you have the Kings crowd. I mean, so that's kind of
they're
interesting.
lit.
You know, yeah, like so that's going to be an interesting factor. Like if they're like 7 in a playing game and it's like one game, because that's a lot different than like a 7-game series, right?
Agreed.
Like they could win one game, but like a 7-game series may be a little bit harder. So that's where I find it interesting because again, then you look at even like the Lakers and Warriors schedules, where their schedules are like the opposite, because the Lakers have one of the toughest remaining schedules, and the Warriors have one of the easiest remaining schedules.
Right.
So there's a world where like the Kings maybe drop, and then maybe the Lakers stay at like 9 or like drop to 10, but then maybe like the Warriors move up, or
Hmm.
maybe like all the teams kind of stay around each other, because then the tiebreakers, if the records get really close, also play into effect. Because I think right now the Lakers and Warriors have only played one time, so technically the Lakers have the edge,
Yeah.
in terms of the tiebreaker. But that could change over the next 3 games, right? Like I think they play next Thursday, so if the Warriors win that one, then they could just kind of get it right back. Although I think the Lakers have done better in the Pacific Division, I think because I think that's the next tiebreaker. And then the Kings have the tiebreaker over LA, right? So like if the Kings and the Lakers have the same record, then the Kings will be over the Lakers. And then I think the Warriors and Kings, they're tied in the season series. I think they both won 2 apiece. So that's where I think it's interesting because I feel like the other teams, like I don't think Phoenix is gonna like Phoenix has a tough schedule, but as long as like 2 of those 3 guys are available, they'll probably still be able to win enough
I think they're gonna win
to
out.
not be able to completely, huh?
I said I think they're gonna win out. Like they're gonna win the
Yeah,
majority of their games.
yeah, I feel like like I think Beal recently got hurt, but as long as like 2 of those 3 guys are available, like they'll probably still be able to win enough.
Yeah,
New
agreed.
Orleans, they got to stay healthy, but they've been able to, for the most part, do pretty well. Um, a couple of weird losses at times notwithstanding. Dallas has won 6 in a row, right? So it feels like they're gonna probably stick around. So that's where I think, like you said, it's probably gonna be a mix of like one of those 3 Kings, Lakers, Warriors,
Yeah.
where it's like 2 of those 3 teams may be more likely, but it's also just a matter of, again, because the other teams, that's the funny part. Is the Lakers and Warriors have been pretty good as of late, but all the other teams around them have been really good as well, right? Like that's the other factor where
Yeah.
it's like, again, we mentioned Dallas, they've won 6 in a row. The Pelicans have won 3 in a row, and I think, aside from like a couple of games, right, like they had a weird loss against LA, they basically won like, they've only lost like one game in their last like 7 games.
Yeah.
Um,
And this half of the
the Sun,
season is where every game counts, honestly.
right, yeah, exactly, just like last year. And the Suns,
Yeah.
like they've only lost like 2 of their last like 8 games or whatever,
Yeah.
like 8, 9 games or whatever. So that's the thing, is that like all these teams have started to catch fire now. So then if the standings don't change, it may be a scenario where it comes down to like, you know, Dallas, Sacramento, LA, Golden State. Maybe Dallas like goes ahead of New Orleans. Maybe just because I feel like Dallas probably just has a higher ceiling than New Orleans, just because I think, because they have a superstar, whereas New Orleans doesn't.
Sure.
So I don't know. Like, because New Orleans has a lot of talent. It's just like, they don't have like a Luca or like, like a Steph,
Yeah. What would their
or
answer be for Luca?
right. Like, like, and that's the thing where it's like, all these teams I feel like we can say are probably good. Obviously, I feel like, of those teams, like they've all had stretches where like they've been good, but then also have had stretches where it's been like not great.
Yeah.
That's why they are where they are, right? Like it's particularly like LA and Golden State, because those two teams had stretches where they were just like garbage, right? And then now they've just recently had a stretch where they were, pretty good.
Yeah.
So they're a little late to the party, but I think that's what's going to be really cool to watch, like the rest of the way, because again, like last year, like you said, every game counts. And it feels like a lot of these teams are starting to peak at just the right time. But again, even if everybody peaks at the right time, you still got a couple of teams that are going to get knocked out, and and again, the West I just think is more interesting than the East, especially at that bottom place,
Agreed.
because again, I just don't like. I mean, maybe they could do it, but like I just don't think the Bulls and the Hawks are probably going to get in. Like maybe they do because it is one game, but you still have to win 2 as the 9-10 in order to get in. Whereas like if you're 7-8, you just got to win 1.
Right.
Like all the Heat or the Magic have to do is win 1, and they're the 7th, and then whoever loses still gets to play the second game at home.
Exactly.
I guess technically the Bulls and the Hawks are not quite as young as the Magic.
No.
Like they have technically more playoff experience, so maybe that might come into play. Maybe, but like I don't know. Like
I trust Orlando's talent, though. I really like
yeah,
Orlando. I think they have the most upside, of
right,
those 3 teams. And then, like in
yeah,
the
because
West, like the problem with the West is everybody's goddamn winning. Like
right,
everybody's winning except for
yeah,
like Denver. I think Denver's like the only team that's on like a significant
yeah,
losing streak in the top 10. So it's
and
like
they built up
everybody's like
enough.
kind of just standing there. And like
Yeah,
like you were just about to say, like they built up that cushion where in 3 games losing, they haven't really dropped. They're still
yeah,
4 and they're still 3
yeah,
games ahead of
yeah, Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Phoenix. Yeah. So and that's where it's going to be interesting, because that means one of these teams that's got like a top, 10 player is going to go home like before the playoffs even started, which is, again, like is interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
again, like, in the play-in right now is Dallas, Sacramento, LA, Golden State, right? And 3 of those 4 teams have a top 10, player. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, so that's what's going to be really interesting. And I don't know which of those 4 teams is, not going to make it, because 2 of those 4 teams are not going to make it. And I
Yeah.
think that's going to be interesting, because like you said, it does. I feel like it's probably like, I feel like the Kings, it's going to be rough because again, like they don't have the same high end talent, but
Right.
they can win 1 game.
Sure.
So like that's the other factor, right? Where it's like maybe they can't win a 7-game series against like, any of these teams, but could they win like a 1-game play in,
Bro, they're
situation?
so volatile though. That's why I don't like them. Like, yes, they
Right.
could win 1 game, but they could also lose 2, Like they could
Right. Yeah.
easily lose to Dallas and they could easily lose to whoever, wins the 9-10 matchup. Like that's my problem with them.
Right. Yeah. Because remember, like last year, the Heat, we just assumed they would win the first one, and they got
Sure.
destroyed. But
Yeah.
then in the second one, they ended up winning, but they almost lost that one,
Yep.
right? So that's where like 1 game is a lot different than a 7-game series. But
Agreed.
again, like the playoff race is going to be nuts in the Western
Yeah.
Conference, because again, it's like last year, but there's even more like decent teams. Like because like say like I don't know, the 9-10 seed last year. What was that? It was like New Orleans and Oklahoma City,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think something like that,
Yeah.
right? We're like, again, the 9-10 seed this year is LA and Golden State.
Yeah, that's wild.
And like say
Crazy.
like New Orleans and Oklahoma City this year, they're the 2 seed and the 6 seed. New Orleans is 6 and Oklahoma City is 2.
That's
So
crazy,
they're
man.
so Oklahoma City is obviously safe, right? Maybe New Orleans, like if they lose, like because they're like a game ahead of Dallas. So like if
Yeah.
they just like lose a couple of games, they could drop to 7, and that's where it gets interesting
The
because
problem
once
is
you because
everybody's winning though. Like,
exactly,
but
yeah,
Dallas is on the bigger streak, so
right, and yeah, and Dallas's schedule, I think, is kind of middle of the pack the rest of the way, right? Where it's like it's not ridiculously hard, but it's also not like ridiculously easy either.
right.
Like they do play, some good teams. Like they play Dallas, I think, what is it, like 3, 4 times or whatever.
Yeah.
I think, or something like that. But then they also play like the Jazz a couple of times. They play the Spurs. They play the Pistons. They play the Hawks. So like
Yeah.
they have the ability. They might be able to rack up some wins because they've obviously improved since the trade deadline. But like you said, all these teams have clearly, have started to peak now. Which again, this is kind of the time where you would like to start getting ready to peak, right? Like you don't want to peak in December and then like fall off after that. You want
Yeah.
to, kind of peak. I mean, obviously, like from the Lakers and Warriors perspective, you would have wanted to have been better. You don't want to be you don't like being the 9-10
No.
seed at this point. But at this point, it is what it is.
You
So
got to
it's
work
just
with
like,
what you got. And like in
right,
the East, like the thing that's surprising to me is like Cleveland is up there, very high up, 36 and 17, and nobody's really talking about them, which is the intriguing part.
right,
And then Milwaukee kind of slipping, I guess, if you want to call them slipping. But then you have Boston. But I feel like the East is just a little bit less exciting, Like the West
yeah,
is like
it
a
is.
really
It
tight
just is.
race, and everybody's
It
winning.
just
So,
is.
and that's just how
It
it is.
just is. Yeah, but because I feel like in the East, we already talked about it. Like it just kind of feels like Boston and then Milwaukee. If Philly's healthy, they might have a chance, but we don't know.
Yeah.
And then after that, like, I mean, the Knicks are good, but like, they're banged up. And then even if they're at their best, are they going to be able to get to the finals?
Right.
Like, they might be able to, depending on who they face, maybe, but I don't know.
It's tough.
Because again, I don't want to just give it to Boston because like we kind of did that last year after Milwaukee, got
Yeah.
eliminated, and then look
Yeah.
at how that turned out. Now, I mean, Boston is better this year.
Agreed.
But still, it's like I don't know, like because it's the East, I just still feel like
I don't
who
trust them.
knows?
I don't trust the
Yeah,
East,
like
bro.
yeah, but it is wild because again, that was my pick to win the title, and like they're still
Yeah.
really freaking good. They're 43-12. They have the best record in the NBA. So they're gonna
Something's
have home
off
court.
though. I could just feel it. You can feel it in the air.
Mhm. Yeah, so we'll see. But either way, like, it's gonna be a wild finish, I think, with this last, month and a half or so of the season. Like I think this
Mm,
is really shaping up to be. I mean, we already said going in that this was gonna be like an all-time great NBA season. But like I think the finish to this, like, to this season is gonna be even crazier just
yeah.
because again, like there's so many stakes, there's so many like good teams. And but like again, in the West, I know I mentioned Boston. I still feel like in the West, your two best teams are still probably the Nuggets and the Clippers. Obviously with the Clippers, you still got to figure out, the health situation, right? Because,
Sure.
again, Kawhi's hurt. We'll see if he's going to be out for a while or if it's just like a nothing burger.
Right.
Hopefully it's nothing, but
Right.
obviously, it's something you got to pay attention to because every year before that, he's missed some time. And then like the one year where it looks like this might finally be it, hopefully he's still healthy. And then with the Nuggets, like they haven't played as well as of late, but you still feel like come playoff time, like we've seen them reach like an elite level that they can probably get to and flip the switch because they did do it last year, and kind of fooled a lot of people, including us, right?
Yeah.
Because they weren't playing as well the second half of the year, and if they had continued that play, we might have actually thought like maybe they could come out of the West. So,
Yeah.
but that's yeah, so I think that's kind of where it stands at this point. But
Agreed.
yeah, but that's why
It's
I
wild,
asked,
bro.
about the final playing spot because I just think like the final playoff spots because again, it's like you know we hadn't people haven't talked about it because we're not there yet. But once we get closer, like and we see like okay, we might have like 4 teams in the plan in the West that are like that have superstars in there,
Yeah.
trying to vie for something
It
and
might
like
make for the greatest play-in tournament of all time.
yeah. Right, exactly. Like, imagine if it was like LA and Golden State as
My
a
God.
9-10 seed, and like one of them, gets a chance to get the 8th seed. They could
Right.
both go home, but like, and then the other just goes home. Period. Like your season's
Exactly.
over.
Yeah,
Like for
that
Golden
first
State, like
matchup is going to be crazy if
right.
this is how the standings are going to stay.
Yeah, and keep in mind, both teams also could be at danger of not having their pick. Well, I think Golden State doesn't have their pick anyways. I think it
Okay.
goes to Portland.
Hmm.
LA, I think it's New Orleans gets to decide whether or not they want to take this year's or defer it to next year.
Okay.
If they make the playoffs, they'll probably just defer it to next year. And if they miss it, they'll probably take it because then it'll be a lottery pick.
Yeah.
So,
Oh man.
but
It,
yeah, I know. Like that was a much longer, close, in terms of that last conversation. But that's where,
but it's
that's
good
why
stuff
these
though.
things are really, yeah, exactly. That's where it gets really cool. And there's going to be more conversations to come about this, in the coming, weeks as we get closer to the end of the regular season.
Oh
But
yeah.
that's pretty much it for today's episode of All Ball Takes. Again, we continue to appreciate the support. In terms of, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, if you comment, on any of our socials or posts or whatever, we'll read it, at the beginning of the episode. And then, just spread the word, continue to allow us, to have our channel grow, and join our Discord to be a part of the community. And we appreciate all the support, and we'll see you Monday.